Forget absolutely everything you know about boring, boxy city buses. What if I told you that decades ago, automotive engineers completely lost their minds building public transit vehicles that looked like alien spacecraft, rolling solar ovens, and literal fighter jets on wheels? Today, we are counting down the top 10 most bizarre, logic-defying vintage buses that will genuinely make you question reality. You will not believe the sheer insanity of these historical designs, especially our mind-blowing number 1 pick, which is so dangerous and visually absurd it is a miracle anyone actually wrote it. You absolutely have to watch until the end to see it. Before we reveal these mechanical monsters, smash that subscribe button. Now buckle up. Kicking off our countdown at number 10 is a vehicle that might make you think you are seeing double, the Bedford Val. Introduced in the United Kingdom in the early 1960s, this was not just your average public transit vehicle, it was an absolute cinematic icon. You might actually recognize this quirky coach from the legendary 1969 film The Italian Job, where it famously teetered over the edge of a cliff. But what makes the Bedford Val so bizarre is the fact that it has 6 wheels, featuring a strange twin-steer setup at the very front of the chassis. The engineering behind this weird design was actually brilliant for its time. Bedford engineers wanted to create a bus that was significantly lighter, much safer, and featured a lower floor for easier passenger access. By utilizing 2 front axles equipped with smaller 16-inch wheels instead of one massive front axle, they achieved a substantially lower center of gravity. This unique layout also meant that if one of the front tires unexpectedly blew out at high highway speeds, the massive bus would not violently swerve out of control, making it a surprisingly safe machine for everyday public travel. It was powered by a reliable Leyland diesel engine mounted right at the very front, meaning the poor driver practically sat next to a noisy, vibrating powerhouse all day long. Despite its very odd appearance, the Bedford VL was a massive commercial success and a massive favorite among tour operators across Europe. Passengers absolutely loved the remarkably smooth ride provided by the unique multi-wheel suspension, and drivers appreciated the precise steering dynamics. It perfectly proves that sometimes adding more wheels is not just a visual gimmick, it is a legitimate engineering solution that paved the way for more insane designs. Coming in at number 9, we have a bizarre solution to a very specific geographical problem, the AEC Renown. When you think of a British double-decker bus, you probably picture the towering, majestic red buses roaming the wide streets of central London. However, step outside the capital into the rural towns and countryside of post-war Britain, and bus operators faced a massive physical headache. The village streets were incredibly narrow, and more importantly, the ancient stone railway bridges stretching over the country roads were terrifyingly low. A standard tall double-decker would literally have its roof completely sheared off. Enter the AEC Renown in the early 1960s, a vehicle desperately engineered to be as close to the ground as physically possible, giving it a squashed, almost cartoonish appearance compared to its taller city siblings. To achieve this aggressively low profile without sacrificing the crucial second floor, the engineers at the Associated Equipment Company had to get incredibly creative. Previously, low-bridge buses forced passengers into a claustrophobic layout with a sunken side aisle upstairs, meaning people literally dangled their feet right next to the heads of the poor passengers sitting downstairs. The AEC Renown brilliantly solved this nightmare. It utilized a highly unusual drop-center rear axle, which allowed the central walking aisle of the lower deck to sit much closer to the road surface. This breakthrough engineering meant the bus could feature standard, comfortable seating on both levels while keeping the overall height safely under low-hanging bridges. Imagine taking a modern city bus and expertly squishing its chassis down, just enough so it can squeeze safely under a low tree branch without crushing anyone inside. It stands as a fascinating testament to how bizarre engineering can get when you are forced to fight against the physical landscape. At number 8, we are looking at a bus that completely shattered the established rules of public transit design, the Leyland Atlantean prototype. Today, if you look at almost any heavy-duty transit bus or luxury coach, The engine is tucked neatly away in the rear. But back in the mid-1950s, this concept was considered absolute witchcraft. For decades, buses were essentially just giant commercial trucks with passenger bodies bolted directly onto them. This meant the heavy engine always sat right at the front under a massive hood, with the driver perched uncomfortably behind it. When Leyland Motors proudly unveiled the early Atlantean prototypes at the 1956 Commercial Motor Show, the general public and the transit industry were absolutely stunned. Where exactly was the massive engine? How did this weird thing even work? It looked like a giant moving brick with absolutely no front end. The engineering reality behind this bizarrely boxy front-engineless design was truly revolutionary. By ripping the heavy, noisy diesel engine out of the front section and stuffing it into a compact compartment at the very back, Leyland engineers successfully unlocked an entire world of new possibilities for efficient passenger transport. Suddenly, the entrance doors could be moved to the very front of the bus, directly opposite the driver. This allowed the driver to easily collect fares and monitor passengers boarding, eliminating the expensive need for a second crew member to roam the aisles. To the everyday commuter in 1956, boarding a bus from the very front while the loud engine rumbled somewhere far away in the back felt entirely alien. Despite early mechanical gremlins, this bizarre rear-engine rebel changed the world, setting the global blueprint for modern bus design and pushing an entire industry into the future. Swinging into the number 7 spot is a bizarre beast born behind the Iron Curtain, the Tatra 500 HB. If you were to draw a heavy-duty bus entirely from memory after drinking way too much coffee, it might look exactly like this. Built in Czechoslovakia during the 1950s, this vehicle featured wildly disproportionate styling. It had an incredibly short, stubby wheelbase, a massive bulbous rear overhang that looked like it was about to aggressively scrape the asphalt, and a weirdly rounded, bug-like face. It looks less like a highway cruiser and more like a mechanical caterpillar. But this bizarre appearance was not a styling mistake, it was a hardcore survival mechanism. The engineering inside the Tatra 500 HB is what truly makes it a marvel. Most large buses rely on heavy, water-cooled diesel engines, but Tatra did things completely differently. They stuffed a massive air-cooled 14.8-liter V8 diesel engine right into that giant bulging rear end. Why choose an air-cooled engine? Because this heavy bus was designed specifically to conquer the treacherous, freezing, and incredibly steep mountain passes of the high Tatras and other rugged regions throughout the freezing Eastern European landscape. Water-cooled engines risk freezing solid in sub-zero temperatures or boiling over on steep inclines, but a Tatra air-cooled V8 simply does not care. It was loud, vibrating, and practically indestructible. Adding to its bizarre mechanical makeup was Tatra's legendary central tubular chassis and swinging half-axle suspension. This meant that when the bus was empty, the rear wheels actually tilted slightly inward. The bizarre, stubby proportions and rugged air-cooled heart allowed it to easily crawl up snowy slopes that would leave modern transit buses completely stranded. It is extreme engineering perfectly tailored to an incredibly extreme hostile environment. At number 6, we enter the era where buses stopped looking like boring boxes and started looking like speeding missiles. The gorgeous and utterly bizarre Flxible Clipper. After the darkness of World War II, America quickly entered an era of booming optimism, heavily influenced by the exciting dawn of the jet age. Everything from home toasters to local diners had to look incredibly fast, and public transportation was certainly no exception. Introduced in the late 1930s but peaking in popularity during the 50s, the Flxible Clipper did not just carry passengers, it aggressively sliced through the ambient air. With its aggressively sloped front end, heavily swept-back windshields, and iconic teardrop shape, it looked exactly like a polished silver bullet flying down the newly built American highway system. The company name Flxible, spelled entirely without the first letter E, so the founders could legally trademark it, was originally famous for building motorcycle sidecars. They brought that exact lightweight, aerodynamic design philosophy directly to their commercial buses. What makes the Clipper so historically bizarre is how much it actively prioritized extreme, sweeping style over maximum passenger seating capacity, typically only seating around 21 to 29 people in absolute premium comfort. Underneath its gorgeous, streamlined aluminum skin, early models were powered by surprisingly standard American automobile engines, like the legendary Buick Straight 8, neatly tucked away in the rear to keep the passenger cabin incredibly quiet. Seeing a Flxible Clipper on the road back then was truly like spotting a shiny metallic UFO. Imagine comparing a sleek modern sports car to a solid brick wall. That was the Clipper compared to its boxy rivals. It became the absolute vehicle of choice for touring rock bands and Hollywood stars, forever capturing the optimistic, speed-obsessed spirit of a beautifully bygone American era. Crashing into the top 5 is a vehicle that takes the concept of a bus and supersizes it to an absolutely comical, mind-boggling scale, the Neoplan Jumbo Cruiser. If you ever thought a standard double-decker bus was incredibly big, prepare to have your mind completely blown. Built in Germany starting in 1975, the Jumbo Cruiser was not just a double-decker, it was a fully articulated double-decker. Yes, you heard that correctly. It was essentially a massive two-story rolling skyscraper that bent right in the middle. It looked like a luxury train that had somehow merged onto the highway. Measuring a staggering 59 feet long, 13 feet high, and weighing roughly 56,000 pounds when fully loaded, the scale of this machine is hard to process. The engineering required to make this heavy monster turn a tight corner was incredibly complex. Neoplan officially holds the Guinness World Record for the world's largest passenger capacity bus with this exact model, capable of carrying up to 170 people in total luxury. The true bizarre genius lay in the heavy-duty articulation joint, a mechanical marvel of 1970s German engineering designed to connect two massive double-deck sections safely. Unlike modern bendy buses where you can walk freely between the front and back sections on a single level, the Jumbo Cruiser had to allow the entire 56,000-pound behemoth to flex and pivot through tight European city intersections. Powering this towering leviathan required a monstrous Mercedes-Benz V12 engine just to get it moving. To truly understand its sheer size, imagine taking two massive Class A luxury motorhomes, stacking them securely on top of each other, and then chaining a second stack right behind it. Very few were ever built because they were simply too large for most cities to safely handle. At number 4, we have the undisputed heavy-duty king of the American highway, a bus so bizarrely iconic it became a massive cultural phenomenon, the GMC PD-4501 Scenicruiser. If you have ever watched a classic movie set in the 1950s or 60s, you have absolutely seen this bus. Exclusively built for the Greyhound Corporation in 1954, the massive Scenicruiser featured an utterly crazy, multi-level design concept. The front quarter of the vehicle sat very low to the ground, holding the driver and 10 initial passengers, while the rear aggressively stepped up to an elevated second level. This towering upper deck was completely surrounded by massive tinted Vista Cruiser windows. It looked less like a standard transit bus and much more like a massive luxury yacht rapidly cruising down Route 66. The bizarre aesthetic was personally penned by the legendary industrial designer Raymond Loewy, the same creative genius who designed the classic Coca-Cola bottle. He wanted everyday passengers to feel like they were sitting in a premium theater, looking down at the world. However, the engineering reality behind this split-level American dream was initially a total nightmare for the mechanics who had to fix them. To haul this massive, air-conditioned, bathroom-equipped beast, GMC initially shoved not one but two four-cylinder diesel engines side by side into the rear, connected to a single transmission. It was a bizarre, overcomplicated setup that constantly broke down, leaving furious passengers stranded on the side of the road. Eventually, GMC fixed the issue by ripping out the twin-engine mess and replacing it with a single massive Detroit diesel V8 engine. Imagine taking your house's living room, raising it 5 feet in the air, wrapping it in glass, and hurtling it down the interstate at a smooth 70 miles per hour. Crashing into the top three is a vehicle that makes modern safety inspectors break out in a cold sweat: the legendary Renault TN6. Introduced to the bustling streets of Paris in the early 1930s, this classic French machine is famous for one incredibly dangerous, utterly bizarre feature. It had a completely open-air rear platform. Instead of safely waiting for doors to open, impatient Parisian commuters would literally take a running jump and casually hop onto the back balcony of the heavy bus while it was still aggressively moving through heavy city traffic. But the danger was not just reserved for the daring passengers in the back. The poor driver of the Renault TN6 had to sit in a totally exposed, semi-open forward cabin right next to a massive front radiator snout. Whether it was freezing winter snow, pouring freezing rain, or scorching summer heat, the brave driver had absolutely no real protection from the harsh elements while manhandling the heavy, non-power steering wheel. Operating this rumbling commercial beast required immense physical strength, thick, heavy winter coats, and a serious amount of old-school Parisian bravery. Powered by a rugged inline-six engine, these mechanical workhorses were so incredibly tough that they actually survived the brutal destruction of World War II. In fact, they stubbornly continued to roam the romantic streets of Paris all the way until 1969. Imagine a major world capital utilizing a completely open balcony pre-war transit vehicle during the era of the Apollo moon landings. While it lacks the space-age aerodynamics of other buses on this list, the Renault TN6 earns its top 3 spot through sheer unfiltered danger and its beautifully bizarre old-world architectural charm. Just missing the top number 1 spot is a vehicle so massive, so visually imposing, and so fundamentally weird that it looks like a comic book villain's mobile fortress, the legendary General Motors Futureliner. Built initially in 1940 and heavily updated in 1953, these giant machines were absolutely not built to carry daily commuters. They were the stars of the Parade of Progress, a multi-million-dollar traveling exhibition specifically designed to tour North America and show small-town citizens the magical future of science. Measuring 33 feet long and 11 feet tall, it was a rolling theatrical stage. Draped in a stunning, beautifully streamlined red and white art deco exterior design, the Futureliner was intended to leave crowds absolutely awestruck. But what makes the Futureliner truly terrifyingly bizarre is the driver's seat configuration. Instead of sitting low to the ground like a normal transit bus, the driver of the Futureliner was shoved into a tiny centralized glass bubble, completely isolated on the very top of the roof, sitting a dizzying 10 feet in the air. To reach the steering wheel, the brave driver actually had to climb a steep, narrow staircase located deep inside the belly of the bus. Because they were sitting directly in the center and so incredibly high up, the driver had absolutely zero visibility of what was directly in front of the vehicle's massive flat nose. It was a complete engineering nightmare, and drivers frequently had to rely on spotting vehicles driving next to them to make sure they were not accidentally crushing a small car. Powering these 30,000-pound behemoths were standard inline-six gasoline engines, meaning they painfully struggled to hit 40 miles per hour on the highway. Today, a fully restored GM Futureliner is worth millions of dollars, a beautiful testament to American audacity. And finally, we have reached number 1, the absolute pinnacle of bizarre, logic-defying sci-fi vehicular madness, the Citroën U55 Currus Cityrama. If you were walking down the romantic, historic streets of Paris in the late 1950s, you might have genuinely thought a futuristic spacecraft had landed and started offering sightseeing tours. Built exclusively for the group Cityrama tour company, this monstrous contraption was designed with one singular goal: to give tourists the most unobstructed panoramic view of the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre possible, regardless of how utterly ridiculous the vehicle had to look to achieve it. Underneath, it was really just a humble, heavy-duty Citroën U55 commercial truck chassis, but the custom exterior bodywork, expertly crafted by the French coach builder Currus, was an absolute masterpiece of bizarre engineering. They stripped away almost all the heavy metal and constructed a towering 2-story framework entirely composed of massive, heavily curved glass panels. It featured a very slanted front end, an open-air viewing balcony at the very back, and a roof made entirely of tinted windows. It looked exactly like a giant rolling greenhouse mixed with a lunar rover. It was so radically futuristic that it frequently appeared in cinema. However, the visually spectacular Cityrama hit a hilarious and truly agonizing engineering flaw. Imagine taking dozens of eager tourists, locking them inside a giant, completely sealed glass box, and then slowly driving them around the sun-drenched streets of Paris in the middle of July. With no modern air conditioning system to speak of, the Cityrama literally became a rolling solar oven. The massive glass windows trapped the heat, slowly cooking the poor passengers as they tried to enjoy the beautiful sights. Despite the sweaty reality, the sheer audacity of its design makes the Cityrama our #1 most bizarre bus. And there you have it, 10 of the most bizarre, mind-bending vintage buses ever built. From six-wheeled movie stars to jet-powered glass domes, it deeply proves that automotive history is packed with crazy surprises. Which one of these wonderfully weird machines would you actually want to take a ride in? Let me know your absolute favorite down in the comments below. If you completely enjoyed this journey into the bizarre, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more.